You guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, I'd just like to start out by saying thank you for having me today. Okay. So,
Can you start off with your
Yes,
name and address, just, thank you.
so my name is Alex Lopez. I am 17 years old. I live 34120 Parkview Avenue, Eustis, Florida. This is a picture of me, and I'll introduce him. He was my host family while I was over in the program. He was very gracious host to me. I'm currently a senior, and I am a proud Eustis resident. Okay, so the program is called American Youth and Leadership Program. About 9 months ago, I was selected out of a nationwide application process to go to Singapore and Malaysia. There were 22 students selected. The program was fully funded by the U.S. State Department, and it's part of America's pivot to Asia, which is where the U.S. focused more political and economic attention on the Pacific. Before I actually went to Singapore and Malaysia, I had to complete virtual assignments. These helped me to understand the economic, political, and social situations and differences in Singapore and Malaysia. The program had an emphasis on environmental sustainability and social media. Okay, so when I arrived in Singapore, I stayed for 2 weeks at the National University of Singapore, which is a very lovely campus. It's co-sponsored by Yale, and Yale has a site on campus. Then I traveled to Malaysia. I stayed for 2 nights in a hotel in downtown Kuala Lumpur, and then I traveled to a hostel also in Kuala Lumpur. Then we went to Malacca, and I stayed in I wouldn't quite call it a village, and I wouldn't quite call it a hotel, but it was somewhere in between those two. And then we traveled back down to the border between Malaysia and Singapore, and I stayed at a water chalet. You can see a picture of the water chalet on the screen. The water looks dirty, but it's not really dirty. It's just shallow, and that's the color of the sediment beneath it. But the water chalet is basically hotel rooms floating on a little man-made lake. That was my favorite part of the trip, was staying at the water chalet. Up there is a picture of downtown Singapore at night. That picture was taken from Marina Bay Sands, which is Singapore's casino. At night, they put on a light show where they put mist over the harbor, and then they shoot lasers on it, and it makes a pretty cool light show. One of the first sustainable programs I encountered in Singapore was Seneco Waste to Energy. Seneco Waste to Energy takes approximately 33% of Singapore's garbage and incinerates it, turning water into steam to turn generators to provide electricity for Singapore. Then after they incinerate it, they take the ash and they use it to fill in more land for Singapore, because it's a very small island and they're always expanding. The only downside sustainably to Seneca Waste to Energy is that it does release CO2 gas in the process, contributing to global warming. New water. Singapore is considered a water scarce nation, meaning that it has to fill its water need through other means other than natural lakes and reservoirs. So to do this, Singapore has 4 national taps, the first being imported water, the second being desalinized water, the third being local catchment, and the fourth being new water. New water converts used water into clean drinking water. Used water is water you flush down your toilet. It converts it into clean drinking water, but the water's primary purpose is not for drinking, but for industry. To do this, it uses 3 processes. The first process is microfiltration, which forces the water through very fine filters to get rid of all large waste. The second process is reverse osmosis, where it pressurizes the water through very small holes in a filter, getting rid of all bacteria and viruses. The third process is UV radiation, where the water is cleaned up after the second step, but just as a safeguard, they will zap it with UV radiation, so any viruses or bacteria that remain cannot reproduce. I even had a bottle, it was fine. Super trees in Singapore, they are a public work project. They are vertical gardens. I don't know if you can see real well in this picture, but there are plants going up and down the sides of these super trees. And in the biggest one in the middle, they have a restaurant. It serves like sushi and stuff like that. They light up at night. They have huge solar panels at the top of them that provide a great deal of electricity. Everything in Singapore is also kind of centered around lowering the temperature because it's very hot in Singapore. So these provide quite a deal of shade and lower the temperature 2 or 3 degrees. We visited a Peranakan museum. Peranakan is a term for a race in Singapore that developed when Indian and Chinese traders came to Singapore. They had to wait about 6 months for the prevailing winds to take them home. And in those 6 months, they did what all sailors do and spawned offspring. And it spawned a new race of people called Peranakans. And it had a distinct culture of its own. There's English influences in its style of art. They were very friendly to the English colonials. A lot of them would go back to England to be educated in Oxford and Cambridge. They formed Singapore's middle class at this time because they were educated and friendly to the English colonials. The elephant habitat. Elephants are native to Malaysia. Their natural habitat is being encroached upon by oil palm plantations, because if you ever go to Malaysia, you will just see miles and miles of oil palm. So to prevent farmers from shooting them on the spot, the Malaysian government takes the elephants and transports them to an elephant habitat. And we got to visit there. We got to feed them sugarcane and watermelon, and they did a little performance for us, as you can see in the second picture. They were awesome. If you held sugar above its head, its trunk would lift up and you could put it right in its mouth. They're very wonderful animals. This is a traditional Malay home. As you can see, it's built on stilts, so it gets a natural updraft. It's very hot in Malaysia too, so what they'll do is they build their house on stilts and put the floor beams a little space in between them, so when the wind blows, it'll get a natural updraft into the house. As you can see, there's a front patio. The front patio is used all the time. It's primarily in weddings. The elders will sit to the right, and the newlyweds will sit to the left. While we were in Malaysia, we actually had a mock Malaysian wedding where we got to see this in practice. The stair, you can't see it in this picture, but every Malaysian home will have stairs that are very open and intricate, because stairs are considered the entrance into the home, and they want to present their best foot first. This is a picture of Malacca. Malacca is a very important port city for Malaysia. We toured the Malaysian River, which has a lot of beautiful overhanging bridges that are very beautiful. And we got up to this hill, which I took this picture from, where there's a very old church. The church is mostly ruins now because it was built in the 1500s, but there's a statue of the man that built it out front with his hand. It's cut off. His hand was cut off in real life, but they built the statue with the hand on, and a rock came over and knocked the hand off, so they just kept it that way because it seems symbolic. The Batu Caves. The Batu Caves are a Hindu religious site in Malaysia. There are 273 steps to the top. That is the largest statue on earth that they built in front of there. The story goes that there was a Hindu god and 2 sons of the Hindu god. Both sons wanted to inherit the Hindu god's kingdom. So the father said, whoever can go around the world the fastest will inherit my kingdom. One son took off, but the other son stayed put and just walked around the father. And the father asked, "What are you doing?" He said, "You are my world." So he won. Yeah. There are monkeys all up and down the steps. They know how to take food and they know how to unscrew water bottles. So you have to be very careful around them. They're very desensitized to people. But they were mostly friendly. This is a rice plantation we visited in Malaysia. Rice is the staple of the Malaysian and Singaporean diet. What they will do is every few months or so, this is the olden times, but the village would gather together and they'd all harvest the rice. They take the rice, which has little coverings on it, little shucks, and they'll put it in a giant mortar. Then they'll take a giant stick pestle and grind the rice until it breaks the shell. And then they'll do what gold miners do with gold and put it in a pan and shake it till all the shells get out and they boil the rice that's left over. This process has been largely automated, but our tour guide explained that this made them lose a sense of community, is what he thought. They irrigate this by having a canal at the top, and every so often they flood the valley of rice just to get the water to each of the ones. Some differences I noticed between Singapore and in the United States and Malaysia and the United States is in Singapore there's a continuous sense of improvement. There's a continuous sense of we're going to get better in the next 10 years. There's not going to be the same. Every year, the public buildings get a facelift, the facility, city keeps getting bigger and bigger, they're always building, nothing stays the same. There's no sense of tradition or really traditional values or anything like that. There's always gonna be getting better and changing. A difference in attitude I noticed in Malaysia was permaculture. Permaculture is the, what my environmental teacher over in Singapore, Malaysia explained to me, is when people grow exactly what they need and then trade for things that other things that they need or things that they want. So this places less strain on the environment. In Singapore, they have a trust in their elected officials. They elected them democratically, so they place a greater trust in them. Whatever law passes, they're going to follow it. The crime rate in Singapore is remarkably low because they have a trust in their elected officials. They also have an efficient government. The laws are being passed constantly and meaningful legislation, unlike some congresses I can mention. Some sustainable efforts in Singapore and Malaysia. I already mentioned the waste energy, the new water, super trees, and permaculture. One aspect I didn't mention yet was the city and the garden aspect of Singapore. Singapore wants to become a city in the garden, which we have a very urban city inside of a rainforest type atmosphere where it's very green, very natural. Also having a lot of trees will also lower the temperature because trees can take some of that heat out of the air. Back to Eustis. What is our vision for the future? Growth in Eustis is inevitable, and it's how we manage that growth will determine how we look and who we attract. Eustis has and should continue to show commitment to sustainable development, particularly energy. This will allow us to attract more affluent people that will allow us to raise the tax base. Some examples of what Eustis can do in sustainable efforts. Some small-scale new water. My teacher introduced me to white roofs, which reflect sunlight more efficiently, lowering the temperature of your house or reducing the global warming. Permaculture and protecting our orange groves. But super trees is what I really want to hit home. I would like to introduce a vision to the Eustis government to have a small-scale super tree. It would charge during the day and provide power for LED street lamps at night. It is basically a metal trunk with branches out that have solar panels on them. It is a public art project that also provides a useful purpose. This saves tax dollars and reduces our carbon footprint and creates quite a few jobs in the process. This would cost around $7,000 to $10,000. I got those numbers from a couple that implemented a small super tree in their property. We'd have to partner with a local panel installer and local architects to make this possible. Finally, we always have to keep better. This is not enough. If we do the super tree, we have to partner with a strong social media campaign to gain national exposure and show the world and the nation that Eustis is a leader in sustainable development. Thank you, and do you have any questions?
I don't, but I just want to say that you did a fabulous job.
Thank you.
Thank you.